Hello, everyone. So we have Jim, Liena, Paul, Hyperlocal, which, okay, so a quick overview here. Liena and Jim are the humans. Paul is the robot. Paul is the algorithmic aggregator. Liena is the genuine hyperlocal entrepreneur who has a whole bunch of 7 sites around Brooklyn, all of which are super local and neighborhoody. And Jim is local, if not hyperlocal. Is launched. You've been live in Philadelphia for 2 weeks and has grand ambitions to take over the world. So I think, given that you're the only person who's actually publishing content by humans about neighborhoods, Liena, we will start with you. What on earth were you thinking? Hasn't this whole thing proved itself to be a fool's errand many times over?
I just heard that hope is eternal. No, I think people do really care about their neighborhoods. They want to know what happens 10 blocks from where they live, where they shop, and for us, it's proven to be very successful.
So tell me about very successful. What does that mean?
We have readers who come back every day for more and more and more, and we drive conversation in the neighborhoods that we cover, and once that conversation's in the stores, in the coffee shops, advertisers come to us. So it's a really easy and wonderful relationship. And
is this true, this thing that, you know, Groupon and Patch used to, I'm going to ask Jim this like quasi-urban myth that 80% of disposable income is spent within like 2 miles of your front door. Is this actually, does anyone have any reason to believe that this is true, or is this just like, again, one of those things which people say to try and convince themselves that hyperlocal publishing has a future?
I certainly don't know that stat, but I mean, it's certainly one thing that's been evident for a long time is that people, I would echo what Liena said, is that people care about their communities, and on top of that, they've spent money in their communities for many, many years. And I think part of why I'm doing what I'm doing is a sense that the opportunity is really upon us now, because the legacy media companies are still fighting all the economic fires, you know, of a quickly declining market. And I just think there's an opportunity as the world turns more mobile and as the demographics get younger. I think last year was the first year that there were more millennials in the country than baby boomers, and so you're kind of headed into a different generation of consumers and a different platform. There's that word, platform.
Damn, I thought we were going to get through
cross that off your hyperlocal bingo card.
We're not going to use the word scale, I promise.
But so I mean, certainly we're banking on the fact that people spend money close to home. They spend money on things they care about, and I think there's a long history in media that says they do that, but we're going to have to do it differently and using different tactics.
And Jim, so Paul, you acquired this company called Everyblock.
So yes, Everyblock was owned by NBC News. It had been started by a Knight Foundation grant a number of years ago, really to rethink journalism at the hyperlocal level, to help people discover content that's down to the block level. Like if I only care about the corner of Hudson and Canal, that's all I'll see in terms of information. Went through MSNBC, and then NBC News, and then Comcast, which is where I work. We internally acquired it from NBC News, so just kind of company to company, family member to family member, and relaunched it in Chicago. And I want to, I think I would disagree with the characterization of robot or machine. I mean, the focus and my view of hyperlocal really, and my view of local in general, is one of kind of embracing fragmentation. I think that's what Everyblock does, and I say it in this way. There are a number of things that we all care about in our communities. There's stories that people write about and talk about, which is what Jim and Liena make sure happen in various communities. There are city services. There is government relations that we all care about. I mean, obviously today is a voting day, so that goes into that. There is public safety and all of these things that we care about. So what Everyblock tries to do is aggregate that information and make it easily discoverable based on what you care about. So we can talk about a city like New York or a city like Philadelphia or a city like Chicago, but at the end of the day, we all live, I'm from Philly, so I live in a neighborhood, and I care about a block. So what Everyblock tries to do is says, based on that, here is all of the content that has been created by people or that has been generated by information from a government or that's been curated by some third party, and here's another way to discover it based on your location. So the whole goal is to make sure that content that's coming from Jim and Liena and others that are creating content can be more easily found.
And in a mobile world, one of the problems with hyperlocal is that you set up a site for one neighborhood in Brooklyn, then you set up another one, then you set up another one. But the dream is that we all have our phones and the phones know where they are, and then all of this content is just going to come to you based on where you are. There's a little bit of a disconnect there, isn't there, Jim?
I think that is a dream, but I think a lot of things we dream about in this industry don't happen as quickly as we expect, but they often happen. The mobile revolution was one we've been talking about for 7 or 8 years, and every year you were kind of waiting for it to happen, and then boom, all of a sudden, now we have more mobile traffic than web traffic in the country. So I think we are headed toward a future like that. I think hyperlocal to me is, I think the way Liena is doing it's the right way, is you have to get a little bit of scale. Because I think it's hard to make one hyperlocal site work because you need to be able to take some of the things that you do and stretch them out across multiple properties to expand what you can make and to keep your costs fixed a little bit. So,
what's your economies of scale? Is that on the sales side, on the revenue side?
Yes, and managing the whole thing. But one side, I don't think is sustainable in the long run. That's why we have a bunch covering a region, essentially, of hyperlocals.
So, Paul, would you consider Foursquare to be hyperlocal publishing?
Would I consider Foursquare to be hyperlocal publishing? I would consider, are you talking about Foursquare of old or the new Swarm thing now?
The new Foursquare.
I think at its core now, Foursquare is a location-based data provider. And it is a fuel for hyperlocal publishing. And I say it in this way. So what Foursquare has done in the previous incarnation, doing all their check-in world and all of that, is, I'm sure everyone in this room knows at this point, they make most of their money by licensing that data to various groups who then leverage it for whatever location-based services they want to put into place. I don't know the stat, but it's a great percentage of the websites out there that are location-based use Foursquare in some way. So I wouldn't consider them a publisher. I would consider them an essential part of the ecosystem of hyperlocal publishing, an essential part of the understanding of what people do at a location level because they've gathered this intelligence over time. And again, I'm excluding Swarm from it. I'm talking about the old, like you said, the old Foursquare of old. So all of that, though, goes back to what I was saying, what we were talking about before, which is I don't think you can kind of just say hyperlocal publishing and separate it from its components, which there is content, there is activity, there's action. I think the power of hyperlocal publishing, and this is what Liena was just talking about in terms of having a set of sites in Brooklyn, for example. It's not just that the content's there, which is important, but it's content that's tied to a location that I care about and that I can then act upon as a person that is living in this community. And I think Foursquare helps you drive that, and I think content helps drive that.
So Jim, let's talk a little bit about revenues here. You have a very sort of bloggy sensibility about what you do, and you have essentially blog posts, and then local businesses can write blog posts and pay you for the privilege, and this is a kind of natural thing, right? I mean, and local residents are going to be just as interested in the stuff written by local businesses as they are.
We make them to be interesting.
Exactly, you force them, you slap them around a bit until it's actually interesting. Jim, is that your model too, the kind of native post, or what's your revenue model?
We are doing native. We're not taking display out of the gate. We're trying to build more of our revenue around events and sort of a membership model, not a paywall, but like building certain aspects of the site out, things that that are driven to get people physically together around issues they care about, and then also to get them to come to events, whether those events are sponsored or paid for by the attendees. But I think part of the reason we went with that model is we were a little wary of putting too many eggs in the basket of display, just because you're then subject to, you know, the downs and slight ups and downs of the CPM model. And we kind of wanted to stay out of that so that we didn't put all our eggs in a relatively unpredictable basket. So we are going to try to build on this idea that engagement isn't just about being on social, but it's about getting people in a room together and talking through issues, which is what doing one city really helps you with. You can physically get people together a lot easier when you're only in Philadelphia or only in whatever city you're in.
Paul, where's your money coming from? Or you don't have any revenues now, right?
No revenues now at the Everyblock level. I mean, we're looking at kind of exploring a number of business models. Nothing yet. There's no ads on Everyblock, and I think the prevailing kind of discussions that we've been having are around, again, I'll probably sound like a broken record, but what are all the different components of local that can be monetized? I mean, there is, viewership, right, which you can monetize via advertising, which is one thing. There's activity and attendance at something, as Jim was saying, whether that's events or something like that. There is tons of small and medium-sized business activity within locations. So are there ways to kind of monetize that type of a connection or relationships, or work with companies that are doing that? So there's, I think, a number of ways, and we're a little bit, I'll be honest, I mean, we have a little bit more options than some other hyperlocal publishers, because the mothership has a lot of business units, which can certainly be supportive of hyperlocal and supportive of local and supportive of content and supportive of tech in different ways. So we kind of
and one of your big things you're saying is email. Like, it seems wonderfully old-fashioned, but once you know where someone lives, you can really target. What you're doing is you're targeting is it personalized emails just to literally where that person lives, or do they just wind up in one of a number of buckets and they get one of a number of emails?
Great. So what Felix was talking about, one of the things that we discovered when we relaunched Everyblock, and I'd love to hear if Liena and Jim see this in their products and others, was a surprise to us, was that the number one way that people actually engaged with this local information or local content was actually via email. We are seeing, and we relaunched in January and have seen, we sent out millions upon millions of opt-in emails where people choose the locations that they care about. It could be a block, could be where they live, could be where they go to school, could be where they work, could be where the kids go to school. They choose the location, and then they choose the information. Maybe they want to see crime or want to see news articles or things like that. And so they sign up for a daily or weekly email, and we're seeing an average open rate of that of 51%, which is kind of ridiculously high. And the reason that we've looked at the numbers, keep expecting the bottom to fall out, but it's not. It's because of that level of personalization, which is I, as a consumer, choose these are my locations. Obviously, I'm opting in to receive the email, and this is the type of information I care about. So that is absolutely in our minds of, okay, well, what is there that we can leverage or build upon or work with partners to build upon? Because it certainly was a surprise to me, and I think most of my team as well.
I mean, I would just add on the newsletter thing. I mean, to me, email newsletters are kind of like the Jason Voorhees of digital. Everyone thinks, they keep thinking it's going to die, and then it just keeps coming back. I mean, it was going to get killed by RSS feeds. It was going to get killed by social media. We started doing a newsletter a month before we launched the mobile and website, and we have 1,000 signups, and we're getting like a 48% open rate. It's handcrafted. It's not automated. It's an editor going in there and summarizing the best of what's been written about Philadelphia by us and by others. And for us, that's what's helped build the traffic quickly. Is we already had people who knew who we were, and what we did. We just didn't have a site to point them to until 2 weeks ago.
We're in the same boat. Newsletters are incredibly popular and they're read, and ours are actually automated, so they are just an RSS feed, but it's delivered to your inbox, and that's how people like it.
So, but then you have to sell them, right? I mean, that's the next step. You need to go out and to local businesses and say, here's this email, do you want to sponsor it? Here's this website, do you want to sponsor it? Talk to me a little bit about you have editors for the websites, and then tell me a little bit about how I can understand where you find that kind of person. Often it's someone who's just running a local blog anyway, who set it up on their own. Where do you find the kind of people who can sell this stuff?
As I said, most of the
Is it all incoming?
sales are incoming calls. We've done very little outreach.
One of the things which has always bothered me about just web publishing in general, actually, is the way in which ad revenues generally get more than eaten up by the cost of just generating those revenues in the first place in terms of the sales stuff. I know you're talking in large part about doing conferences instead of display ads, but don't you have the same issue that all of trying to, never mind the cost of the content, just the cost of getting the revenues is just, you can't make it work.
Yeah, we're not really talking about conferences, though. We're not talking like Texas Tribune, like what do they call their annual thing, TribFest. Well, we're talking about a lot of smaller bore things. I mean, our site's aimed at millennials in Philadelphia, so we're talking about more bar-like events, which are a lot easier to plan. You can plan them a lot more quickly. So we're aiming for more of a different model on events. We may do an event like that at some point, but it's not in the plans immediately. But sure, I mean, you're always going to be fighting that battle, especially the first year or two that you're around. I mean, we have someone, I have somebody on contract with me who I've known for many years who is, used to run the Philadelphia Inquirer corporation used to own the Philadelphia Inquirer, who knows everybody in town who can help sell. So we've been in to see all sorts of people, agencies and advertisers and public officials who I couldn't probably get in to see because I don't have those kind of roots in Philly. So yeah, I mean, I'm spending all my time focused on the business side, and I've been an editor for my entire career, and honestly, it's a hell of a lot of, it's hard work, but it's fun to be on the other side of it, trying to figure out how to raise money.
And would it be fair to say that most of the revenues for a hyperlocal site or a local site are going to come from exclusively local businesses, that you're not going to get sort of some larger chain thing? You're more likely to get the individual stores, the small businesses who are actually based in your location. Is that reasonable?
I think that's reasonable, yeah.
Liena?
I think I have mixed feelings on that one. I think in terms of the number of businesses, the locals will always be by far the biggest. In terms of revenue, the regional businesses are a much better business.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I think that, the idea of being able to reach any of us that live in a certain area isn't the kind of exclusive domain of the businesses that are in the area. I mean, there's, other, whether it's regional or even national businesses with local presences are going to want to have that level of targeting. That's certainly the feedback that we get when we just kind of look at things from the content side and the content targeting side.
Liena, you have the great advantage in Brooklyn of having this unbelievably sort of weird and fragmented real estate brokerage market, where you have all of, somehow the big Manhattan brokerages find it very hard to break into Brooklyn, and you just get a whole bunch of individuals who need to get themselves noticed somehow. Is that, how much of your business is that?
We know a lot of them. In hyperlocal and in neighborhoods, you end up knowing people and knowing the business owners, whether they're, about a third of our readers are actually small business owners from what we've surveyed within those neighborhoods. Wow. And it's, it's a very tight ecosystem.
So you're almost B2B in that sense, aren't you? A bunch of small businesses talking to each other.
I have definitely put in touch a pharmacy with a vet and, that kind of stuff.
Well, I think that's an extremely important point because, I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't acknowledge that hyperlocal publishing, however you define it, isn't just a kind of a one-to-many enterprise, which is, hey, I'm writing something and I'm sending it out to some anonymous group of readers, more or less, that are just living in some other place. It's really, as Liena said, I think that 1/3 is just an amazing number that are community contributors from the business side as well, commingling with the people that are just residents, commingling with those people that are government officials, commingling those people that were civically engaged. And I think that as you think about business models, then you can start to expand your thinking and say, okay, well, what do each of those pockets of people or pockets of groups need They may not all need a display ad or a text link or even a native ad. They may need another level of engagement or be willing to monetize in a different way to support their business or reach consumers or get their message out, whatever the case may be. But when you can think about it outside of the normal kind of, I'll call the standard publishing model or the standard broadcast model, kind of mix them together, then I think you can really think about ways to get lower cost, higher margin revenue.
Liena, how many people live in each of your neighborhoods, roughly? How big are these neighborhoods?
The smallest is about 25,000. The largest, about 200,000.
So this is the question which I want to kind of, I see a spectrum here of how hyper is hyperlocal. I mean, you're starting off in Philadelphia, which has 2 million people. It's not very hyperlocal at all. You're in that sort of 20 to 200,000 range. And Paul, you're sort of you're trying to get this down to like 1, aren't you? You're really trying to individualize this as much as possible.
Well, not quite down to 1, but you know, down to, really, you know, I'll call kind of, I don't want to say a low number because that's not really the right way to describe it, but, you know, a very targeted group as defined by the person. So, you know, we kind of try to cut across a metro. So the way that we work is we go into a metro. We're in Chicago and Philly. We're going to be launching in Denver, Boston, and Houston, and Miami over the next couple months. And while they're metros, they cut across different location cuts. So whether that location is a neighborhood, so that's X number of people, you know, usually a few thousand or something like that. Obviously, if you're looking at some people care about blocks, or some people care about, you know, a city council district or a police district, in which case you're talking larger numbers, you know, tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands, depending upon the district. So the whole goal that we have is, and this is a personal view of hyperlocal, is a little bit different in that I don't really view hyperlocal solely as content that's created at the local level. I consider it content that is relevant to a local level. So that could mean just because something maybe is produced in Brooklyn and they're talking about Northern Liberties in Philadelphia, does that make it any less relevant to someone in Northern Liberties? So, so that's kind of how we view location too, which is that it kind of allows a person to define their definition of most location relevance.
Liena, how did you, I mean, you seem to be moving down these very sort of time-honored neighborhood boundaries in Brooklyn, which have been around for, well, you know, I don't know, decades, if not a century.
They shift a bit, but yes, they're very well defined, and they're not zip code defined, they're not city council boundary defined, they're not police precinct defined, they're defined by, in New York, I mean Brooklyn, by public transit and by commercial strips.
And you find that to be a sort of natural scale to be working on?
I'm European. In Europe, they found that people try to stick if you're walking within about a square mile of their home. And if I look at the neighborhoods, that's roughly what it corresponds to. As we move away deeper into Brooklyn, where it's more car-based, the neighborhoods get bigger because the distances that you comfortably can quickly get to by car are bigger.
Jim, Philadelphia is a car-based city, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, there's public transportation. It's not elaborate as Paul would, but there's a pretty significant system there. But it's heavily car-based, as every morning on 76 would attest to. But I think in our case, we're defining, there are a lot of predefined communities that, not predefined, but they've been around for a long time that we're focusing on. But we're also trying to get into defining some of our own communities, but the communities are not necessarily geographic. They're communities who care about development in the city or public transportation or public education and building groups around those. So that's why I wouldn't put myself in the hyperlocal category. We're not trying to redraw districts as much as we're trying to touch people's interests and issues that do affect everybody in the city. And I could just say one thing too. I think what's interesting is I think local publishing is in this, I always call it like the huddling for warmth phase now, which is that we would, if Liena was in Philadelphia, we would all be working together at this point, because Paul and I have already talked about, we've already met a bunch of times figuring out how we can use what Everyblock's doing in Philadelphia on BillyPenn.com. And if Liena was there with the site, we would be working with her. And I think for so long we got into this, like, we must kill everybody else who does what we do. And I think now we have to figure out how to work together in a way that we haven't in the past.
It is the 6th borough. Are you going to be moving into Philadelphia?
No.
we're not even moving into the 2nd borough. We're not even, not even making inroads into Manhattan yet. Yeah. Maybe?
I mean, there are plenty of boroughs in New York.
We should have some questions because you guys look much more intelligent than me. So find someone, ask a question. Anyone? No one? Yes. Wait, let's find a mic for you. Where does whence does you see, what I did was I surprised the organizers here. They had no idea I was going to jump this way. And
just going back to the question of monetization and the revenues, where you're at now and where you project to be in a year or two, do you see the profits that you aspire to coming from more where you are in growth or expanding into other cities? What's the strategy or model?
Is that for me?
yeah, all of you. Well, see, yeah, I mean, you're pre-revenue as well.
I am.
So,
I'm quite pre-revenue. Live for 2 weeks, so I think certainly part of the idea would be to go into other cities, but I don't think we're even thinking about that until we get this one on some kind of stable footing. So I think I suspect most of it's going to come from just increasing traffic, getting more deeply embedded in the community than you can be after 2 weeks, and starting this events business. We have an event tonight. We have an election night event over at Drexel where we have a bunch of people coming to kind of do a public election night, in a sense, a viewing party that'll have citizens, it'll have a bunch of journalists showing up at it. And I think that's like literally pulled together in 2 days. So I think we're going to do a lot more of that. And I think you'll see as we build out these kind of communities on the sites that's where we're going to try to generate revenue from. I'm just a believer that we're going to have to get money from the people who use our sites in ways that we have generally ignored in the past. I just think the paywall is a terrible way to do it and will not work for the generation I'm going after.
Yeah, do you consider yourself to be a local business just like the ones, or not too dissimilar from the ones that you're selling to? And
I'm very much a local business, and it's been very much a self-financed project. So so we're careful. That said, I think hyperlocal content works when it's a good quality content, and that kind of content is expensive to produce, and that growing the readership is also an expensive and quite a long-term proposition. Like, it takes a couple of years to establish a site and get the kind of readers that you want coming back regularly. So we're constantly experimenting, and I am absolutely not saying no to any new revenue stream, whether it's, I mean, we run display ads for businesses who don't have street presence on the main strips. We do custom content. We do announcements. I mean, it's just, it keeps changing, and I think it's going to keep changing for us some time. We are also exploring membership options, and we'll see.
Well, so we're, as I said, we're not generating revenue on the Everyblock side. Our focus is impact, but I can say this, that we're working with a number of organizations in in the 2 markets we're active in right now, in Philly and Chicago, and have been certainly approached with business proposals to actually generate revenue if we wanted to, but it's really been around 2 big things, which is how do you monetize, really 3 big things, like do you monetize the viewership, that is by advertising, do you monetize the activity, and I'll say that both on the site or off the site, or that's driven by it, or do you monetize, and I know we've been avoiding this order, do you monetize the platform or the technology, and that third one, what I mean by that is as an aggregation engine, more or less, our goal is to drive, as I said, drive people to content that's being created. So, can we be a complement and a help to people that are, whether you're a civic association or a nonprofit or a for-profit company, to help grow that readership.
You're like those RSS feeds, aren't you, which we're going to kill email newsletters.
That's right.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
one
and
of many things, right?
I also thought data is going to be huge for us down the road, is the gathering of data and the using of that data to spot revenue opportunities. I think there's all this talk about content versus technology, like what is what, and I think the answer is you kind of have to have, I always say, boots and bits. You got to have boots on the ground, and you have to be able to use data to figure out how to monetize those. I think a lot of hyperlocal sites just threw up good content and thought, well, that'll be enough, and it's not.
So, Liena, do you get scared because you're sitting next to like a multi-gazillion-dollar evil global megacorp right here, who clearly has, you know, I mean, I can't imagine that Comcast would be remotely interested in the kind of revenues you have in your wildest dreams. That obviously, you know, what Paul is doing here is shooting a much more of a moonshot than anything you're aiming at. I mean, what's your reaction? Do you think this is just, do you kind of look at it and laugh and go, oh my God, these massive corporations, they're hilarious? Or is it actually a bit scary?
Content discovery is something that I've been curious about for a long time, because being somebody that doesn't have much by way of resources to invest in technology, it's like, all right, so who can get my content to most of my readers on somewhat of my schedule? And I think, you know, it's interesting to see Facebook do things, and, you know, having the email lists, which is the only thing that goes out on my schedule, to my readers, having Twitter feeds, well, we have Pinterest boards too, and Instagram and Facebook, and
Paul,
having people pick it up.
It's good.
I mean,
It's good for you. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I'll finish off with this question for Paul, which is that surely, you know, are you not in a business which Facebook could wake up tomorrow and just do all of this in its sleep? Because it has all of the users already, and it knows where they are because they're all on their phones, and it has access to all of the same information that you have access to, and it can drive that traffic at a scale which you can't even dream of yet.
First of all, let me disagree with Comcast as an evil company. We are not an evil company. You know, we're, you know, at the end of the day, we launched Everyblock because we're a local company. I mean, anyone who knows the cable industry knows that it's all local. I mean, you have local permissions to do business, which is why it was such a great, great asset to bring on. And so, to your question though, your Facebook and an Everyblock are on two opposite ends of the spectrum. So, you know, on the Everyblock side, you know, it is about identifying the location relevance of the content itself, not necessarily of the person. So Facebook has information. Yeah, they know I'm in zip code 19103 and all this kind of information about me. What they're currently not looking at, hey, Google. I mean, someone could, wake up and say, I want to do this as well. But what Everyblock is doing, and which is relevant to these guys on stage, is saying, I'm looking at the content itself. And based on the location information that's inside the content, the technology says, oh, well, that is relevant to this location. And then deliver it to the person who says, I care about that location. So we're on the other side. We're not looking at personal information. We're looking at content information.
So on which note, I will wish Liena the best of luck, really, because she's the one who's been out there for years creating the content that the rest of you are going to build on. And Jim, you have 7 people now in Philadelphia writing stuff and doing videos.
4 writing stuff, 3 working business product.
4 writers. You know, in a sort of writer to population ratio, Liena's way ahead of you. so I give Liena, thank you, Liena, and I hope that you technology guys can drive lots of traffic to her and to people like her, and that we can have a renaissance of this thing, which always seems to be the technology of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.